China. China got completely destroyed in the Great War, but the country's fate was sealed years before the bombs actually dropped. That's because about 11 years before it, China was having resource shortages due to problems in the Middle East, and that desperation motivated them to invade Alaska in 2066, essentially starting a war with America that would last until the bombs did eventually fall. Now, there was a tug of war between the two superpowers, with China dominating initially, and then America turning the tide with their T-51 power armor. But none of that mattered when the nukes fell because, well, there was nothing to fight about anymore. China was destroyed like everyone else on the planet. The government collapsed, the military disappeared, and society just stopped existing altogether. We don't actually know much about who survived in China itself, because the information is really limited. The only survivors we can confirm are a few who somehow made it to America. A Chinese submarine called the Xi washed up near San Francisco, and its crew started the Xi faction by salvaging parts and settling in old Chinatown. Some Chinese soldiers at a spy facility called Mama Dolce's turned into and stayed there for over 200 years, still defending their post like the war never ended. That's really all we know about what happened to China itself. It died along with the rest of the world. Canada. In 2059, the United States started pressuring Canada to let American troops guard a pipeline, and that's when everything started going wrong. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline ran through Canadian territory, and America wanted it protected from interference by other nations, especially China. For obvious reasons, Canadian citizens weren't happy about foreign soldiers on their soil, and this led to tensions. And so when China invaded Alaska in 2066, the US military's presence in Canada increased even more, and that's when things really started to go south. Eventually, it came to a boiling point in 2072 when someone tried to sabotage the pipeline. America used that as an excuse to invade and officially annex Canada on June 3, 2072, ending it as a sovereign nation. What followed was brutal occupation with American forces executing resistance fighters in the streets, including one execution caught on camera that became the opening scene of the original Fallout. The violence between American troops and Canadian freedom fighters kept going right up until the bombs dropped, which wiped out the infrastructure that made controlling Canada worth it in the first place. Post-war, some Canadians survived and headed south into what was left of the United States. Characters like Marge LaBarge and Dave Handy in Fallout 2 came from Canada after the war, with Marge saying she was born way up north near Lake LaBarge. Their presence proves that crossing irradiated borders was possible, and that some Canadians saw America as the better option despite everything. Mexico. Before the bombs dropped, Mexico was being crushed from every direction by nature, by politics, and by the United States' hunger for oil. Washington used Mexico's instability and pollution as a pretext for invasion, though the Fallout Bible hints that those same conditions may have been deliberately engineered through US sanctions. Then came disaster from below. In 2042, a massive earthquake leveled Mexico City, and although they were rebuilt by Mr. Handy robots, the new city didn't last long. It was one of the first to be hit with multiple nuclear strikes during the Great War. The survivors quickly turned on one another. Looters took the ruins and became the earliest raider tribes, carving out chaos amid radioactive streets. One of the few witnesses to that world is Raul Tejada from Fallout New Vegas, a ghoul mechanic who lived it firsthand. His hometown, Hidalgo, was spared direct nuclear hits but swarmed with refugees until desperation consumed everyone. He tried to reach Mexico City for safety, but what he found instead was ruins and violence. The radiation claimed him too, turning him into a ghoul doomed to roam the wasteland for centuries. When the new California Republic eventually expanded south into Baja California, they didn't find thriving settlements waiting for them. They found desperation. At places like Rattletail, the struggle for survival had become so fierce that NCR settlers ended up killing dozens of locals over a single well. Mexico endured, but only technically. The land lived on, even if the nation didn't. USSR/Russia. Fallout's timeline can't seem to make up its mind about whether the Soviet Union collapsed before the Great War or not. And honestly, that uncertainty fits the Cold War paranoia baked into the series. There's evidence for both outcomes. A Fallout 3 newspaper shows a map labeling the Alaskan invaders as Russia in early 2077, implying the USSR still existed. Yet Fallout 4 references scientists running simulations of a joint Chinese-Soviet attack a decade earlier in 2067. Then Fallout 76 introduces Lev, a Soviet immigrant who arrived in the US just before the bombs fell, and Vault 13 even granted asylum to Natalia Dubrovsky, the daughter of the Soviet ambassador in Los Angeles, proof that the USSR still had diplomatic ties and influence during those final years. And so the most likely explanation here is that the Soviet Union never actually fell. The divergence in Fallout's history kept it alive longer, largely because it didn't need to fight over resources. The USSR still had oil, uranium, and the minerals everyone else was willing to kill for. That made isolationism the logical move. Sit tight, conserve strength, and watch the rest of the world tear itself apart. When the Great War came, they weren't spared. The conflict was global, and the USSR almost certainly traded nukes with the United States, China, and the European Commonwealth. United Kingdom. The UK took heavy damage during the Great War, but at least some of its people made it out, many finding their way to post-war America. Before the bombs fell, Britain's history largely mirrored real life. It fought through World War II with the US, then became part of the European Commonwealth, which later joined the Middle Eastern conflict during the Resource Wars. The country was still ruled by a queen as late as 2077, something confirmed by Mr. Handy Robot's program to serve Her Majesty. But after the Great War, the picture gets a little bit hazy. Characters like Alistair Tenpenny, born in Britain around 2197, prove that some form of civilization survived. His decision to cross a radioactive ocean to make money in the capital wasteland suggests things back home weren't much better. Or maybe Tenpenny was just crazy. But some people followed his path, though, like Desmond Lockhart, a ghoul from Point Lookout, who once served the British intelligence and continued his missions long after the bombs fell. Dean Domino, the English lounge singer turned ghost of the Sierra Madre, carried traces of British culture into the Mojave. Even James, the lone wanderer's father in Fallout 3, speaks with a distinctly British accent, an odd remnant of a world that probably didn't die after all. All these scattered stories point to one conclusion: Britain survived, but it changed. The world burned, but across that ocean, UK might still be standing. Japan. This country is one of the biggest blank spots in Fallout's lore, almost erased from the record, with only fragments hinting at what became of it. Before the bombs, its story followed real-world history: Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Okinawa, Iwo Jima, events that still shaped Fallout's version of history. But by the 2070s, Japan still had some connection with the rest of the world, proven by the Watoga marching band in Fallout 76 had planned a trip there just before the Great War. Traces of Japan linger in small ways. Katanas remain valuable weapons, a Yakuza gang operates in Fallout 2's New Reno, and in Diamond City, the robot Takahashi speaks broken Japanese, his corrupted code a quiet echo of the past. Outside of those details, the record goes silent. Japan may have served as a US base against China, which would have made it an early nuclear target once the war began. Whether allied or neutral, the result was the same: destruction and fallout that erased nearly everything. However, Japanese survivors exist in post-war America, like the Nakano family in Fallout 4, but the home they left behind is a mystery. Whatever Japan became, it didn't survive the Great War intact. Norway. Norway only gets a single mention in the Fallout series, but even that tiny glimpse says a lot. In Fallout 4, players can find the FMS North Star, a Norwegian cargo ship stranded off the coast of Boston. The entire crew had turned into ghouls, still guarding their ship long after it ran aground, their old discipline twisted into mindless hostility. They still shout in Norwegian as they attack, phrases like "La oss være i fred," meaning "leave us alone," and "Yakamayam," or "I come home." That ship tells us more than it seems to. It means Norway lasted long enough, after the Great War, to have operational ships still crossing the Atlantic. Whether the North Star sailed just days after the bombs or decades later, no one knows. Its ghoul crew has been defending the wreck for centuries, still clinging to duty long after their nation vanished. It's a small story, but it suggests Norway survived, at least for a while, before fading into the same silence that swallowed most of the world. Mongolia. This country barely appears in Fallout and is mentioned only through cultural references to its history. The clearest example comes from the Great Khans, a raider group from Vault 15 that built their society around the ideals of the Mongol Empire and Genghis Khan. In Fallout New Vegas, their leader Papa Khan searches for a way to guide his people, a goal that directly ties back to their cultural inspiration. You can even give him a history book called Pretty Pretty Horsies, a history of the Mongol Empire, which reinforces that connection. Fallout 76's Pioneer Scout exam, a small quiz used to earn scout badges in the game, adds a few extra nods to Mongolia. It mentions the country twice, one question about the mystery of Genghis Khan's lost tomb, and another about how the Trans-Siberian Railroad passes through its territory. Even centuries later, bits of Mongolia's history still show up in odd corners of the wasteland. There probably would have been more references to Mongolia if Fallout Extreme wasn't cancelled. It was supposed to feature a raider faction called the Huns, hinting that similar chaos spread there after the war. Now that's just speculation, but it fits with what little we know. There are no confirmed survivors, no settlements, and no direct signs of life from Mongolia. Ireland. This country somehow made it through the Great War in some capacity thanks to a few details revealed to us in the game. Firstly, multiple characters have Irish heritage or accents, indicating enough contact with America for people to emigrate post-war. Colin Moriarty, the foul-mouthed bar owner in Fallout 3, came to the US as a child with his father, who made his fortune securing trade routes to Megaton before dying in a raider attack. This confirms transatlantic travel was possible, though whether Ireland is thriving or desperate enough to send people overseas for opportunity remains unclear. Kate, a Fallout 4 companion, has a strong Irish accent with no migration backstory, so she might descend from pre-war immigrants who kept the accent alive. Then there are other cultural references in the game. Patrick the Celt in Fallout 1 works to preserve Celtic traditions, collecting clothing, food, stories, and songs. John L. Sullivan in Fallout 2 embodies Irish stereotypes. Constantly drunk, boxing background shouts "Aaron go brag," meaning Ireland forever. Eddie Winter's holotapes mention Irish gangs in Boston, and he visited Dublin, Galway Bay, Kilkenny, and Waterford, trying to improve Irish-Italian mob relations. It's safe to say Ireland survived, maintained some form of society, but people felt the need to cross an irradiated Atlantic to America. Whether Ireland itself looks anything like it used to is unknown, but they're still around. Taiwan. This country gets one mention, and it's cryptic as heck. In Fallout 4, a terminal entry mentions PAM being used to stabilize the Pascal situation in the Taiwan Strait. And that's pretty much the entire reference. We don't know what the Pascal situation was, when it happened, or what stabilizing it meant. Could have been a military crisis, economic collapse, anything. But the fact it happened in the Taiwan Strait suggests tensions were brewing between Taiwan and China, which tracks with real-world geopolitics. Given China's aggressive expansion and resource wars throughout Asia, Taiwan was probably either annexed, invaded, or caught in the crossfire when China went to war with the United States. Post-war, there's just not much to know. Given its proximity to mainland China and strategic importance, Taiwan almost certainly got hit during the Great War. Venezuela. In Far Harbor, there's a robo-brain in Vault 118, housing the brain of Ezra Parker, a con artist who financed and managed the Cardoza Medical Research Center in Venezuela. We get zero context about the facility, why Ezra built it there, or what research they conducted. That's it. That's the entire Venezuela entry. No information about what happened before or after the Great War, no indication of resource wars involvement, nothing about survivors or settlements. The fact that a wealthy American built a medical facility there suggests Venezuela was stable enough and under enough American influence to allow foreign investment. Did Venezuela get nuked directly? Probably not, since they weren't a major military power. Did they suffer from global fallout and societal collapse? Almost certainly. Did anyone survive? No one knows. Germany. The country appears in Fallout mostly through small references, details scattered across weapons, locations, and characters. Fallout 1 shows images of Hitler and Nazi Germany, with the Reichstag appearing in the intro, suggesting its World War II history followed the real-world timeline. Several iconic weapons also trace their origins to German design, like the PPK-12 Gauss pistol, the Vindicator minigun, and the M72 Gauss rifle. Fallout 76 adds another layer with Helvetia, a town founded by German immigrants in the 1800s who brought over the Fasnacht holiday, which still exists centuries later. Other hints include cities like Dusseldorf, mentioned in the Nuka World Shovel Museum, and Kronek, known as the birthplace of Dr. Stanislaus Braun, the twisted overseer of Vault 112. But beyond these fragments, post-war Germany is also pretty much a blank space. There are no survivors, no factions, and no cities known to have made it through. When the Great War came, it was almost certainly hit, but by who and how badly? No one knows. And that's the fate of every country in the Fallout universe. Pretty wild, right? Which one surprised you the most? And hey, if you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Fallout lore dives.